This episode is brought to you by Indie Film Hustle Academy, where filmmakers and screenwriters go to learn from top Hollywood industry professionals. Learn more at ifhacademy.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Eli Horowitz. How you doing, Eli?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show, man. I appreciate you coming on the show. You are your new film, The Cow, is going to be premiering at South by, and we're going to get into the weeds on how the hell you made that thing come to life. I'm really curious to see how that came to life. It's a fantastic film. But first, man, how did you and why did you get into the film industry? I mean, this is an insanity.
Well, yeah, it's been a circuitous path for me. It wasn't ever something I imagined would happen, because this is my first movie. I never even made a short film or anything. So I spent most of my 20s and part of my 30s, a good part of my 30s, kind of doing independent publishing. I worked for this place, McSweeney's. So I was editing and designing the books. And so that was my world for about 10 years or so. Moved from that into some kind of weird digital novel projects, some sort of apps and books, exploring geography, all sorts of weird stuff I can ramble about if you want. From there, I stumbled into podcasting. And so I ended up co-creating the Homecoming podcast with Micah Bloomberg. And that was sort of at this beginning kind of podcasting, stepping to the spotlight, these narrative podcasts. And it started Kath and Oscar Isaac and David Schwimmer. And so that got some attention. And as a result, it became the Homecoming TV show, which Mike and I were the co-showrunners of. That was on Amazon for a couple of years. And then from that, I ended up doing this. So it was really very much a one step leading to another, never having a plan. You know, I'm from Virginia, and like the idea of actually kind of making a movie was always felt very foreign. So it wasn't even really on my radar.
So the traditional way you make movies is what you're saying. The traditional path that everybody goes down is what you're saying. Got it. So yeah, because I doing research on you, I'm like, oh, these guys are the Homecoming. You know, you did Homecoming. And I'm obviously a podcaster, so I've been podcasting since 2015 when apparently it wasn't cool back then. Now it's super cool. People are getting deals off of podcasts. I'm still waiting for my phone. I'm still waiting for my phone call. But but you had a narrative podcast. So how did you? I've always been fascinated. How did you put together such a cast for a narrative podcast? Which you didn't have like a wealth of history doing podcasts or anything like that. So how did you even get that small project off the ground?
It was very strange. I mean, so it was with Gimlet, this podcasting company that was kind of gaining some energy. So that gave it credibility, but it was their first narrative one. We were working with this producer, Alicia Vancouvering, who, I mean, I was thinking we would just find like whoever or use my friends or something. She thought, no, it could be more. And so she kind of led the train in trying to get them. But it was also, I think, a novelty. I mean, the first one we got was Catherine Keener, and it all flowed from there. And that was it was a huge shock. I don't really know why it happened. I can say it was partly because, she just, for the whole first season, she had to work for, I think, 4 days,
Right.
Obviously you didn't have to get into costume or makeup or anything like that. And, they really get to actually act, which I think for most of them is what they actually like to do more than anything, be in these scenes, read these lines, explore these characters. There was no setup, there was no teardown, there was no waiting in the trailer, there was none of the around. So I think it was an easy thing to kind of take a chance on. But I don't really know. I mean, the real answer is I have no idea. It was a strange fluke that continues to have strange repercussions until today.
And then how did you get the call that Amazon wanted to produce a narrative show based on this podcast?
Well, it was one of these things where at each step of the way, the thing seemed somewhat plausible, the next step, right? So it's like, once we had this great cast, then, okay, some people it's going to get some attention. That's not crazy. Then when it's getting some attention, it's, well, sure, like people are going to kind of Hollywood sniff around and make conference calls, And then, okay, when we're having the conference call, we'll have another conference call. In each case, it was just like flipping a coin and it coming up tails, right? And so no one thing was such a shock, but then that just happened kind of 13 times in a row. And then 6 months later, we were there with, Julia Roberts and Sam Esmail making the TV show.
That's pretty quick too. That's a really quick turnaround.
It was great. So I mean, that might be slightly exaggerating. So the first episode of the podcast came out in November of 2016, and it finished in, I think, January 2016. We were in the writer's room by August of 2017. So in the writer's room, basically 7 months after the podcast ended.
Uh-huh.
And then it came out, 7 months after that or something.
And how did you attract Julia Roberts to I mean, because she doesn't do TV. Or let alone.
I've never done TV before. Yeah. It was another one of these things where it's like when we were like having all our conference calls, people were saying like, we heard Julia Roberts is interested. Julia Roberts is definitely interested. She's a big fan, and it's like exciting, but it's also
like, really?
I think that in my old age, I've earned to like, all right, that's cool, But then because of that, it wasn't shocking when someone said it again that she was still interested. And then because of that, after we had heard she was interested 5 times, well, then it made sense that she was doing it. Maybe I was delusional, but it just kind of one thing kept leading to another. I can't really explain it. When I stand back, I'm aware how strange it is. But
so have you been buying lottery tickets lately? Because there's apparently some sort of lucky streak that you should be taking advantage of, even more so.
It all up.
Is this
I've used it all up.
You've used all, and again, I always
plenty of other gems, plenty of other things. That's the only. I mean, there's like a survivor bias or a confirmation bias about all this stuff. You never see all the things that fizzle, right? That don't happen. The times when somebody mentions this person's interested, and then you never hear about it again, right? So right. It does give a kind of weird sense of it, I think, to hear these stories.
Right, exactly. And I always like telling the audience is just like, look, because I've had a lot of, I love dissecting the path of filmmakers and how they get, especially from their beginnings, how they got the opportunities, because it's so difficult to get into the business, let alone when you're trying, as opposed to when you're not trying. And I've had many filmmakers on the show that weren't trying either and got these things. But it's never like someone just knocked on your door and like, here's some money, let's go make a movie. You're working, you're doing stuff that is putting yourself out there. And yes, certain chips fell at the right place, right time, right product kind of scenario that allowed this to kind of go. But it's just like, man, when it's your path, man. There's just like doors just swing open when you're supposed to be when you're walking the right path, things just happen for you. And sometimes, it doesn't. Most of the times it doesn't.
I mean, you mentioned lottery tickets. I do think it's like that. Like you need to have a bunch of them, right? So I did a bunch of different projects, tried a bunch of different things, worked at a bunch of different mediums. A lot of them, I did a book that probably sold I wrote a book that was like 1,500 people.
Right.
And you just keep kind of making things and doing things, and then maybe something will work. But I didn't feel like those other things didn't work because I wasn't going towards a certain goal. I was trying to focus on the project at hand. So
you were blessed without having the goal of being a filmmaker at 20, and you were struggling at a publishing company, but what you really wanted to do was direct. You were stuck. You were not stuck, but you were on that path trying to make that work, and then these other opportunities presented themselves.
I could never have done that. What I think a lot of people have to do, that really like having a goal, and I don't think I would have had what it takes to really have that kind of focus and drive while sensing. I have to kind of convince myself that I'm doing something that no one's ever done before or is even trying to do, because if I feel that kind of crowd around me, it becomes a little depressing.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, you also, with your partner, you guys were showrunners on Homecoming, which is very odd as well. That doesn't happen first time out, let alone you've done not even a short prior to this. So what was that experience, and how did that happen?
Well, that was really due to Sam Esmail and to Chad Hamilton, his producing partner. So Sam Esmail was from Mr. Robot and stuff. And, I think he likes to kind of blaze his own trail too. And so very much had the attitude of like, if you guys want to do this, just do it. We'll figure it out. There's nothing fancy about it. And it also really helped. So Micah and I were the showrunners. Sam directed all the episodes of the first season. So that took a big part of the classic showrunner responsibility off our plate in terms of like managing all these different directors for every episode and recreating the show each time. But there was a ton to learn. Micah definitely knew more than I did going into it. He had been working as doing production sound for indie films for like 10 years before that. For me, everything was new. And again, the only way I was qualified or ready for it was because I hadn't really been qualified for anything else I had done before. When I was dropped into like editing and designing books, I hadn't done that before. When I did Homecoming, I had done a podcast before. So I did have a kind of sense that if you just pay attention and work hard and listen, you can figure things out. And in a sense, a lot of it comes down to story, right? And I did think I had a good sense of that. I had a lot of experience with collaboration. So maybe like the core skills I was sort of equipped with. But in terms of the details, I mean, yeah, I was in way over my head. I mean, I remember even, the first day on set, like putting on the headset, listen in. And I was thinking, oh, this is just like that scene in Notting Hill when he go, like my reference points were so childish. But, you learn, you get help, you do your best. And then, I mean, that's still where I'm at very much. So,
So you were Hugh Grant in that scenario. You were.
Yes. Exactly.
That's amazing. So, but also, I mean, I have to imagine because, after I've spoken to so many different people on my show over the years, the one thing that's a common thread is imposter syndrome, which people just think at any moment security is going to come and escort you off the set. I have to believe that you must have had that by the buckets on that set because literally you're just like, I feel like I'm in Notting Hill. Like, is someone going to come and take me off the set at any moment? It happens to Oscar winners, so I have to imagine it happened to you.
I would say yes and no. Yes, and probably for the most part, even on this movie, when we can talk about that. Yeah. But it's more like, I guess I have a constant sense of I'm trying to figure this out, like I was saying, for all those other projects. So it's not like that there's a level you're supposed to be at and I'm not at that. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing, so let me try to figure it out. Right. So it's imposter syndrome, but maybe without the panic. I mean, my biggest day of panic of this whole process was the night before the first day podcast, because I was directing that. And I didn't even know, I literally never seen anyone direct before. And it's a hard thing you can't watch clips really on YouTube particularly. I mean, maybe there's some clips that someone could send me, So I was literally Googling like how to direct, because I was sure these people would be like A++ because I got these amazing actors. And it was all about, how do I look like a director? How do I not like just seem like a fraud? So that day I very much had it. But then what I find is, once you jump in, essentially everything is like everything else on some level. It's like you're in this small group of people, you're trying to figure out how to make it work, and you're just trying to give and take and find solutions, So
you didn't come on set with a director shirt on that said director with a monocle and a bullhorn. You didn't do that.
I had them in my bag in case I needed it.
Yeah, that's always my favorite when I go on a set and I see the director has a director shirt on that says director on it. I'm like, oh, this is probably not going to end well.
It just says director?
It literally just says it. Oh no, that is not only just a thing. On a project that I was on years ago, I wrote my first book was based on me almost directing a movie for the mafia back when I was in my 20s. The gangster that I was the producer literally bought shirts for all the crew members for the day that we were doing the sizzle, but he put director on every shirt, so the entire crew was walking around with director on. So think about imposter syndrome at that point.
Right. It'd be good to, like, I guess, stop, like, if there was assassin coming for the director, then you have everyone wear.
So there, on that sense, I was safe that day. That day, I could at least 2 or 3 would have gone down before they got to me. So now I have to ask.
It's almost the opposite. It's where when I get nervous is when I feel like I have to look like I totally know what I'm doing.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
And so that's one of the parts about directing I probably, still, of course, I mean, there's many parts that I still need to work on, but that's really one of kind of, because people do, I think, want to look to you as someone. I mean, there's a balance. You want to seem present and questioning and collaborative, but I think it's also helpful to seem like you've got it. You've got a clear vision, and everyone's going to play their part in that. And so I almost have, I think, a tougher time with that second half of that, of projecting like
Right.
that I've got it all figured out.
Because you've got to have that fine balance of everybody has trust that you know where the ship is going, but you're also open enough to not to be so arrogant to go, I know everything, I don't need any help. So it's a really fine balance of like, hey, I don't know this. How can we work? And you have great collaborators, your DP, your production designer, your actors, especially the caliber of actors that, you've been working with, so you can kind of work it all together. I have to ask, so when the first time you met Julia Roberts and she walked into the room, dude, what's that like? I mean, a guy from our generation is like, working with Julia Roberts, you're like, what the hell, man?
It was crazy, but it was the same kind of thing where by the time we got there, it was very strange, like with Catherine Keener, with Oscar Isaac, David Schwimmer's trained even before that with other kind of authors that I've worked, working with Stephen King in my 20s, that was like, so again, you kind of get used to the general phenomenon. And then also, someone like Julia has been spending the last 30 years meeting people who are meeting her for the first time, so
she knows how to do it.
Good at kind of putting people at ease and setting the good tone. She was such a professional through that whole project.
That's amazing. Now on either both the podcast and or the show of Homecoming, what was the worst day where you felt like the entire world was coming crashing down around you, and how did you kind of overcome that? And that could have been completely internal. It could be a completely internal breakdown, which happens to all of us, by the way.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, definitely in some ways, it was that kind of night before the podcast started where I felt the most just like, why did I do this? Can I just go home instead, And once you're in it, you're just figuring it out, like there were certainly like while shooting it, there's days where things are going wrong or just long days or whatever, or, I can't get into full stories, but like in season 2 of Homecoming, it got, like when you get more organizational and with levels of studios and networks, some of that can be kind of frustrating, let's say. But almost everything else after that first night was in it was out there. It was a problem to be solved. I can't remember a time when it felt like totalizing, like, oh, we're doomed.
Right.
We were just like, well, let's figure it out,
I mean, you have some hell of a collaborators on that. That show
Definitely.
looks gorgeous. It was so well done, so well produced, so well acted, so well written. I think directing I'd say 90% of directing is who you collaborate with between actors and DP and all your crew. Because they're bringing so much experience to the table. You just kind of like...
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's the easiest job, being the showrunner. Showrunner a lot of days, we just kind of like sit there and sort of say what we thought about things or answer, but like all the other work was everyone else was actually doing the actual work. So yeah, the collaborators make so much of a difference, and that's how I like to work anyway. So
now the cow. I just had the pleasure of watching The Cow. It is a fascinating film, to say the least. It stars two of our generation's great actors, Winona Ryder and Dermot I can never say his last name.
Mulroney.
Mulroney, thank you. Dermot, yes, yes, exactly. But they're fast. They were just wonderful. And I have to ask you first, how did you get this? How did you come up with this script, first of all? And then how did you get money for this film? Because this is not blockbuster. There's no capes here.
Right. Well, it was another fairly random thing. It was while I was working on Homecoming, the TV show, I got this cold email from these guys at Boulder Lake. These they've done about 11 movies, but they were these two friends from childhood who were like 28 years old at the time, mostly doing, I think, low budget horror. And they just asked if we could meet. And I was in LA. We were, I think, writing the second season. I live in San Francisco, so I was kind of very out of place. Didn't really know a ton of people. My wife was still back here. My friends were here. So I said, sure, I'll meet. I'll hang out. we hung out once, I guess maybe twice. And then and meanwhile, I was feeling somewhat frustrated in that second season. I come from this kind of indie publishing background, very hands-on, doing all the things. And then the bigness of Homecoming, it has a lot of advantages, but also was becoming a little wearying. Just whenever there's that much money and size involved, it has ripple effects, both in terms of like, all the different voices and factors you have to consider, and even just little things like, when you're choosing a location, you have to think of like, how are you going to park these 5 camera trucks at that location? Just like the physical size of it was an issue. So that was all, didn't feel totally in tune with my DNA, just how I like to work and how I came up. And I think they picked up on that, and they were looking to work with different kinds of people. And so they just sent me an email that said, like, if you want to make a movie, true crime, thriller, or horror, 80 to 120 minutes, write and direct, budget of $200,000. And that just sounded like such a nice change of pace, from what I was doing. And also just like a good experiment. Like before, I was probably ready to kind of probably be like, well, this world's probably not for me. And so I thought, well, before I decide that, let me try working in this medium, but in a different style, and see how I feel about that, And so it sounded like a great opportunity, I imagined kind of like a Roger Corman type situation, like banging it out, getting it done, figuring it out, no one watching. So that was that. So then I just started writing. I mean, I thought it was a done deal. I guess it probably in reality could have fallen apart at any moment after that, but I was like, okay, I'm making this movie. So then I hooked up with my friend, Matt Derby, I've written another book and done some other projects with him earlier, really talented writer and hard worker. But so the genesis of the actual movie and the story was, well, how do you make a movie for $200,000? So the budget, I said, ended up creeping up as we got this cast and stuff. I think it ended up more around $1 million or so. I don't know if that's a secret or not. Maybe we'll have to tell you I did it out someday. But but meanwhile, what I had been doing while I was, just before I did the Homecoming podcast, was I bought and fixed up this rundown old cabin in the woods about an hour and a half north of here in the redwoods. And so I'd been staying there sometimes and renting it out sometimes. And I thought, well, one way to make it for cheap is put it in my house.
So that literally was literally your place?
Yeah, that's my house. Yeah.
That's a beautiful location, brother.
It's a great location. Yeah, the house is actually a mobile home. There's still wheels underneath it, but then this whole kind of cabin around it. But yeah, the location's amazing. End of the road, redwoods view. So yeah, I just thought, let's set it there. And that was before I had a story or anything. It was just, it's going to happen in this house, or part of it will happen in this house.
You backed into the budget.
Yeah. So that's how I work. It's hard for me just to think of story in the abstract. I sort of try and think a lot about the form first with all my projects. The whole story of Homecoming came out of how do we tell a story in audio without a narrator? And every detail about the story kind of flowed out of that. So this was how do you make a movie for $200,000? I'm sure there's a lot of other ways, and people have done it for less, of course, but it's a starting point.
Well, yeah, I mean, so all right, so you start off with $200,000. You start backing into this thing. So you write the script. They give you. They love that. They read the script. They love the script. They're like, let's make this thing happen. Now let's get a cast together. How do you get Winona and Dylan on board?
I just wrote her a note. I mean, went through normal channels. Went through her manager, I believe, but I had two things in my favor. Never met her before, and I didn't know anyone who knew her. But one, she actually grew up for a lot of her childhood in this area, in this kind of northern California. Even some of these specific locations we went to, we filmed half of the movie in Petaluma, which is actually where she went to high school. So there was kind of that whole connection. I don't know whether that sealed the deal or not, but I threw that out. And then also, her name isn't actually Winona Ryder. That's
It's
far too
no, no.
cool.
Wait a minute, if I may,
You may.
because I am an '80s geek. Her last name is Horowitz.
Exactly. So no relation to anything, but I was able to throw that out too. And then we just sent the script, and 4 days later she texted me. It was just like 11 at night, and she texted me. I was like, "My dude, it's Winona. Love the script. Let's do it." So that was another one of those very strange moments, but I guess she liked the script. I mean, there was nothing else going for it, so.
And then of course once Winona's involved, then it's a little bit easier now to start building up other.
I guess
cast.
another thing, if we're looking for like life lessons or whatever, I think another thing that helped was, so McSweeney's is the publishing company I worked at for 10 years. Mm-hmm. She had back then been a big fan of McSweeney's. So that's just to say, like, when you make things and put them out into the world, their lives and ripple effect can go by very unconventional patterns,
Listen, I just had yesterday, literally this happened to me. I won't say who it is, but I got an email from a former guest who's like, "Hey man, I just want you to know, I got this email from this guy. Take a listen." And I'm reading it and I'm like, holy cow, this person is listening to my podcast? And I'm like, how is that? What? I'm like, and I just kind of like put it out there, and I'm always fascinated about who you meet along the way. They're like, "Dude, I've been a fan of yours forever." I'm like, what?
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's insane.
And it can come in unexpected ways, or it can come years after the fact.
Exactly.
But,
yeah. And you don't do it because you're like, okay, when I put this one out, Steven Spielberg is gonna listen to this. That's not Steven, by the way. I'm just throwing that out there. Everybody, it's not Steven Spielberg. But
that's exactly what you'd say if it was Steven Spielberg, though. So probably Steven Spielberg.
It's James Cameron. It's James
Steven Spielberg.
It's James. It could be James Cameron, but no, I'm joking. It is. Trust me, James is probably. He's not listening to the podcast right now. Let's just put it that way. He's in Avatar world. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. You never know what happens when you put something out and how it affects other people, and that's remarkable. So you got the big fish, which is Winona, and then that kind of just as a ripple effect, I'm bringing everybody else in.
Yeah, I had actually worked with Dermot Mulroney on Homecoming. He was in a couple episodes of that, and he was great to work with. And then but it really same as having Catherine Keener for the podcast, getting Winona for the movie.
Do you recommend? It makes things easier, and I want people listening to understand that if you're able to, nobody wants to be the first to the party. That's with financing, and that's with cast. Though cast, if they really are attached to the project and the creator, it's easier to get a big name attached first before money shows up, and then that kind of helps the doors all start swinging open after the fact.
Exactly.
So I would go out. Go ahead.
And having a date, I think, right? Like having a production date is the other thing that can really help. Like this is actually happening. It's not just one of these many other things in a big mushy pool.
Right, exactly. You get like, we need you on November this to November this. That's when we're shooting. Are you available? Yep, we have an opening in that schedule. Perfect. Let's lock that in. And then now you're in a mad rush to make sure every other part of the puzzle is prepared for that date.
Right.
So what was so now you're directing your first feature. You've got an amazing cast. Yes, you're in your home, so you feel a little bit more comfortable. But on that first day, man, when you walk on set as a director, man, what the hell was that like?
Well, there was definitely a lot of imposter syndrome then. I mean, I remember even more than the first day. I remember when you were about to start the first scene. Because I had this great AD, this guy, Travis LaSalle, and we worked on a bunch of stuff. We had talked over a couple just key basics, which was like, oh, wait, am I actually going to like say, how did the scene start? Like they were all ready and I was watching, and then Travis looked over me and was like,
say action.
And then we finished and he looked over me again. I was like, cut. So yes, on a very basic level, I didn't know what I was doing. But it was great. I mean, there was, especially just as it happened, like the first few days, the cast was super prepared. The crew was ready. We had good scenes. We didn't overload the days for those first couple. So, yeah, that really helped us get off to a strong start. And again, it's like I keep saying, like the all the packaging or trappings or cosmetics, that's where it's kind of being unfamiliar and stressful. But then once we were in it, you know, obviously you knew this story really well, had a good relationship. I made sure to, as much as possible, talk to the cast. You know, you have limited, we didn't have actually any rehearsal time, but individually with each of them, we had kind of multiple times talking through the script and the role and the scenes, which wasn't even so important for the actual content. I mean, maybe some, but it just really helped kind of build up this level of trust. So then when the scene's not working, you just get in there and say, what do we think? I'm trying to get it more like this. What do you think? You know, and you're just two people working for a solution together.
Right. So that's how you approach directing the actors. You kind of just sit there and
Exactly.
like, I mean, you obviously know what you want in a scene. You want, and you know what you want out of the actors, but you're like, what do you think? How do you see this going? I mean, because again, when you're working with the kind of actors you're working with, I mean, you know, Winona and Dylan, and they've been around the block so much that you'd be foolish not to listen to some of their ideas at this point.
Yeah. But just as much for, you know,
the
like
other actors
Brienne
as well.
Chu
Yeah.
who are like 21 years old. So yeah, I mean, the thing I don't know how to do it all, you know, there's this other version of directing where you're kind of like somehow eliciting these performances. I mean, I don't want to call it mind games because that makes it sound too negative, although I'm sure sometimes it is a bad thing, but just like pushing the buttons and triggering the moment and stuff and having a certain mystique. I just don't know how to pull it off. And that's when I would really feel kind of imposter syndrome, you know? I just find that too exhausting. So, and I've just I haven't, in my experience, people haven't also responded to things like, you know, pretend like this table is on fire for this scene, right? And like that's your triggering sense. You know, it's a thing, and I'm sure it works sometimes, but I just can't take myself seriously unless I'm just having a normal conversation with someone.
No, the best is I had a director on the show tell me this amazing technique, which I've used since then as on set, where you tell the one actor, it's two people in the scene, and they're talking to each other, and you tell one actor to like, okay, make sure that anything that this person says to you, you are completely rejecting it internally. And then the other one is like, you say the opposite, the other one, and then they don't know that as actors.
Right.
And when they're in the scene, they just start feeding off each other. And that work, I think that's a really good way to kind of, it's not a manipulator and it's not a mind game. It's just motivations. But the other person doesn't need to know the motivation. It's a personal thing with those actors. That I found really works well as a director, as opposed to, you know, if you want to make someone cry, you yell and scream and insult them on set. Like that's, you know.
Right. I mean, every now and then I'm trying to think, like one thing I did that I was proud of that I don't know, that probably had no effect at all was, so it's this couple, which is Owen Teague and Brienne Chu, this kind of young couple, and they both had some fake tattoos, you know, for the character. But I had them come up with a basically matching pair of tattoos, and not tell me what they meant. So only they would know what those tattoos meant. So I kind of thought that would kind of create a, you know, a sense of them as a couple with a secret, you know?
Right.
Maybe that worked. I think mostly it probably made me just feel like I was the clever guy for a day and made them feel clever. You know, I tried sometimes.
No, exactly. But those are the little fun things you get to do with actors. It's just a lot of fun. Was there a day on the cow where you felt the world was coming down crashing around you as a director?
Oh yeah. A lot of those. I mean, one thing I kept going back to was this interview with George Miller, who said that like he was talking to some other young director who's giving them advice, and he said like the day will come when you feel that everything's going wrong and you have no idea what you're doing. Just keep going. Yep. And then at the end of that director called him back and was like, yes, that was good advice, but what you didn't tell me was that would be every single day. And yeah, that definitely happened. Almost every day there was some time or another when it was just like,
The camera's not working. We're losing light. The actors, there's something wrong with the location. I
yes,
mean, you did this during COVID as well, so there's COVID
uh-huh.
protocols.
Yeah,
The money's not there. Food's not arriving at this time. The trailer didn't show up. All this craziness
yeah,
that we have to deal with as a director. It's insane.
yeah, yeah. It was really just good to know that like my job is just to get through these 19 days, kind of. And it's not for me to decide whether this is any good, whether this was a good decision, whether this is going to work out, whether it was worth doing in the first place. Just shut that part of my brain off and just get through it.
And you did, man. And you
Oh,
went through, you got it done. It looks fantastic. You get it through post, and then you guys submit to the festival circuit, and you get the phone call. What was the phone call from South by like?
that was great. I mean, it was another one of these things where you hear kind of rumblings before it comes. But this was really my two things I wanted was to get to go with it to a festival, and then for one of these for Brienne and Owen, like because I thought they did such a great job for to see them like go on to bigger and better things. Those were the kind of two concrete things that I could look for this movie. Because everything else is so
Right.
nebulous. They go out into the world. Some people see it, some people don't see it. Some people like it, some people don't like it. Whatever. But so it was really fun. So I'm so excited. I'm going fly down to Texas tomorrow, and yeah, I'm just excited for the whole experience of it. Even seeing the other movies. I mean, also just after these 2 years of COVID, like I'm excited to see like a finger food and an open bar.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be a lot of new things for me.
Bring a jacket. I'm just gonna
Oh
let you
yeah, yeah,
bring a jacket. It's not hot right now in Texas,
yeah,
so
right.
it's a little bit chilly, especially at night.
Yeah.
So now, is there something that you could, if you could, would you go back and what would you say to your younger self starting this part of your journey? Like when you went into like on the podcast, if you could go back and like a few days before the podcast and go, look, dude, you're gonna go through a hell of a journey right now. This is the
Mhm.
one thing. This is the one thing I wish I would have known.
Two things. One is this kind of point I'm making where it's like, in the end, it just comes back to normal foundational skills. If you know the story and you're willing to talk and listen and be collaborative and ask questions, that can take you through almost everything to some extent. So no need to panic about anything. And then the other, which I'm still trying to keep an eye on, is just make sure you have a decent sense of why you're doing the thing that you're doing. I think it's especially something that I'm grappling with now is, in this industry, it seems like there's a lot of like opportunities that are half presented, that are floated, that you're supposed to chase for. There's a kind of a clear sense of like what the ladder is, and you're supposed to always be moving up a bit. Previously I didn't have that as much because we were sort of in my own little world doing things. I was out of publishing was all in New York. I was living in San Francisco. It was easier to just focus on the thing at hand and try and do it as well as you can. And now there's sometimes you'll hear about something that seems like a good opportunity, or can I pass this up, or I should jump on it while I can. And sometimes that's true, but there's also just a kind of gravitational pull of those things that might not really speak to who you actually are or what you actually want to be doing. And so being willing to actually chart your own path in this industry that I don't think is particularly suited for that, or at least not very encouraging of that, is something I'm still trying to grapple with.
Oh yeah, you definitely have not walked the path of what Hollywood expects or wants. Yeah, you've definitely been burning the
I mean,
new.
even doing this movie, probably like if I had, I don't know, I'm just making this up, but like, like after doing Homecoming, which is like a big show, I think probably a lot of people would have thought like, well, now I should be trying to do a movie as big as that, you
Right,
know,
with the Julia Roberts style,
this kind of
actress.
budget and whatever. And instead just being like, I like these guys. It sounds like a fun opportunity. Let me just do it. I think I'm really glad I did. But it's still like every week there's something where you kind of need to check in with yourself about that, and it's hard to calibrate exactly right.
Right. No, I agree with you 100%. And look, you're doing fine, brother. Don't don't you let anyone else tell you any different, brother. You are doing just fine. I always tell people to listen to your gut, man. If it makes sense to your gut, don't. If you start trying to play the Hollywood game, you will lose, because that game has been lost by the best.
Yeah. Like, no one ever feels like they've made it. No one can ever like snap their fingers and get what they want. I mean, maybe 2 or 3 people in the entire industry.
Even the 2 or 3 people in the entire industry that can do it is specific kinds of films.
Right.
So James Cameron could get Avatar made, which is an insanity, but probably arguably the only human being on the planet that could do something like that. Mm-hmm. But if he's like, what I really want to do is a comedy that costs $500 million. Yeah, you see, that's not happening. That's not happening. Right. Spielberg couldn't get Lincoln made, man. You know, and Scorsese couldn't get Irishman made until Netflix showed up. Like, there's very few.
So if you ever think you're ever going to get to this like promised land, if I just do this, then, you know, you're still always yourself.
The only guy who could do that is Nolan. Nolan's the only human being right now on the planet that could do whatever he wants, and he has a blank check right now. It's pretty amazing.
I don't know. I wonder if he feels like, you know, everyone I think still feels kind of
agreed,
frustrated or limited, or why isn't this working out the way I should, or if I only this, or.
No, I mean, look, he's making a movie about Oppenheimer for $100 million at a studio. Not many human beings get to do that, bro. You know, so it's pretty. But you're right. I don't think he's sitting there going, smoking the cigar, going, hey, so what else am I gonna do now? Let's shoot it in black and white while we're at it. Let's. But it's always like I don't know about you, but I always like watching, you know, the titans of our business take swings at the bat, you know, just at bat, because they're the ones that move the line, man. They move the chains for all of us, because if they don't, man, you know, it started back in, you know, in the early silent days with Chaplin. They were all taking swings, and we all kind of moved the whole medium forward. So it's pretty remarkable. Oh, now where's the cow going to be screened? Like, what are the days and times?
It's on Sunday at the Zach Theater. That's the premiere. And then it's Tuesday. I'll be there also at the screening on Tuesday. I'm not sure which theater. And then also, I think, Wednesday.
Great. And is there any distribution yet, or not yet?
No, I think that's what the festival is for.
I wish you. I'm sure you'll do okay, brother. I'm sure you're gonna do it. If your road that's up to this point is any indication of how things are rolling out for you on certain things,
I'm telling you, you're only hearing about the good roads.
I know, and I'm joking with you, because I know there's been a lot of pain. I know there's been a lot of suffering along those things. A lot of things that fizzle out.
I just mean I could list my 4 other projects I've done in the last 2 years that you haven't heard of. You know,
exactly.
I did a whole other podcast that you've never heard of and no one's ever listened to that came out last year, you know? Had pilots canceled. Don't come on the show, you know?
It happens. Yeah. I know. But I think on this, I think you'll do okay. If any indication after watching the movie, I think you'll be fine. Now I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests. What advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
I mean, I think, like we're saying, just finish things, have things that exist around the world. Don't just try and wait for things to line up for that one big strike. Just make things.
What is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
Honestly, the thing I've been reminding myself lately is that I actually like to work, because I kind of reflex it and I'm like, I don't want that sounds, I don't want to. And then I sit around and I'm just doing nothing, and I feel extremely grouchy all day. I'm like, what's there to do? You know, so I'm trying to remind myself, no, you actually like doing these things. You want to do them. So
all right, fair enough. And 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Oh, of all time, I'm just going to say in the last, I'll have to just say in the last few weeks or something. I don't even know all time. I can say 3 films that helped inspire the cow. How about that?
Fair enough.
So one was this movie came out about maybe 3-4 years ago called Border. It's a Danish movie. That this is definitely goes in the category of the less you know, the better. These are really my favorite movies in general, is ones where what the movie is kind of unfolds in front of you as you're watching it, instead of saying, like, this is a heist movie and then it's going to be a fun heist, but you basically know the start, the end, the middle, whatever. So Border's the first one, and that I don't mean to make it sound kind of impenetrable or anything. It's almost like a fairy tale, but meets a noir, and it helped really inspire The Cow. Keeping with the that category, maybe I would say Pig, which I hadn't seen yet when I made Cow, but I felt definitely some affinity for. There's definitely a whole cow, pig, lamb, livestock triple feature movement coming on. But I really loved the way that one kind of created its own world and its own tone. It was a very specific tone, which I feel like some people, even viewing, didn't quite get. I mean, I don't know. Everyone can get their own view of it, but I feel like it was very aware of its own sense of humor and its own sense of strangeness, and was willing to be kind of elusive in that way. Something I wonder about for The Cow and all my projects is like, are they a fun mix or are they neither here nor there? And that was very willing, and Border also was to just straddle those lines and be their own thing and just let the chips fall where they may. And then let's say, I don't know, something that I really liked was 10 Cloverfield Lane. Just like a nice, contained, classic movie that I thought was really smart about always being aware of what your expectations were and meeting them quite soon instead of like stretching out for an hour. Like, wait, is it possible that this guy's lying, or is it possible they're, get into there in 15 minutes and then do another and then another and then another. So really being conscious of the viewer and giving them credit and playing with that and being in dialogue with that. I thought that movie did a great job of.
Eli, man, I appreciate you coming on the show. Congratulations on The Cow. I wish you nothing but success with the film. I think it's going to do very well, like I said before, and just keep walking the path, brother. You're doing just fine, brother. Walk the path, man. Thanks for being on the show, brother.
All right, bye-bye.